Should we start now or do we need to wait for a few more minutes?
I think we can start now. Dr. Muhammad, ready ke?
Boleh je, tak masalah. 15 orang pun okey je.
Alright, okay.
Okay then. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good morning to all respected audience. Thank you for joining the webinar organized by the Institute of Planetary Survival for Sustainable Wellbeing or Planetiium. My name is Syed Amir Faris and I will be your moderator for today's webinar on food security. To gain blessings and barakah from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, let us commence our session with the recitation of Ummul Furqan Al-Fatihah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Amin amin ya rabbal alamin. This webinar is planned to address briefly the issue of global food security, the usage of frozen zoo technology, the threat to food security and the alternatives to common food. It could be an effective medium to disseminate relevant and important information in order to develop awareness and knowledge on the global issue of food security. So before we begin, please allow me to explain on the flow of the webinar. Our first speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad, will be presenting his topic on frozen zoo technology for food security survival. Next, Dr. Redzuan Nul Hakim will be presenting an important topic of the under-addressed threat to food security, climate change-induced plant-borne toxicity. And later, our third speaker, Dr. Tengku Faris, will be presenting an interesting science fiction-like topic of lab-grown meat, a cheap yet quality alternative protein. And finally, we will have a Q&A session before wrapping up the webinar. So if the audience has any question or comment at any moment of the webinar, you may write your question or comment in the chat box and we will tend to the question during the Q&A session. Also, for your information, the attendance link I attend will be given in the chat box during the webinar session and the evaluation form will be given at the end of the webinar. So to start with the first presentation, please let me introduce our first speaker briefly. Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad bin Ibrahim obtained his PhD in Nutritional Science from University Putra Malaysia, UPM. He is currently the Deputy Dean of Postgraduate and Responsible Research and Innovation for Kulliyah of Allied Health Science, IIUM. Research projects include, but are not limited to, the field of antioxidants, natural products, and the establishment of frozen zoo at IIUM in conservation plans for endangered species in Malaysia. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Muhammad to present the topic Frozen Zoo Technology for Food Security Survival.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and all the invited speakers. Together with me today is Dr. Redzuan and also Dr. Tengku Faris. And I would like to extend my thanks to Planetiium, IIUM, Institute of Planetary Survival for Sustainable Wellbeing, what we call it Planetiium, for this opportunity to share my thought on how we can use the frozen zoo technology, which is cellular and molecular biology technology, to ensure that we are achieving the food security survival for our country, and also we can provide the tools and hands to the world to share the technology for the benefit of humankind. And then today I'm going to share with everybody. It is not teaching, and this is not a teaching types of presentation, but it is just a sharing session with regard to the technology that we have in the Planetiium to ensure the food security survival of our later generations. So for your information, the Planetiium has been approved by the IUM top management to cater a few areas that can contribute significantly to the health of the planet, including the food security aspects. So today I'm going to present to you a frozen zoo technology for food security survival topics. So basically, what is frozen zoo technology all about? So basically, the idea of this zoo is to ensure we could conserve the animal, even though the wildlife were dead biologically. So nowadays, cellular and molecular technology becomes one of the tools that has been used as an effort for conservation of wildlife. So with this particular technology, the life and dead cells are required for cryopreservations in minus 150 degrees Celsius or minus 80 degrees Celsius freezers, and conducting research related to the genetic changes in the animals. This is the previous approach of the frozen zoo technology, but when we establish the institutes and what we call it Planetiium, we would like to extend the technology being used in the field of genetics to the animals, to the plants, and also it is going to be a new geoplasm bank for the country. So then they will be processed for the cell derivation, histology, and genomic extraction. So this is basically what the frozen zoo technology all about. But looking at the chance, looking at the opportunity that can be used diversely to impact the food or food security field. So I took the challenge to connect this particular cellular and molecular technology in giving the opportunity for food security to have their impact. So what is food security survival all about? So according to the Food Agriculture Organizations, food security is defined as when all people at all times have physical and economic access to the sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. So the key words here is all people at all times have physically accessible to the food, to the nutritious food, and then also economically accessible to meet their dietary needs that later on will have impact on their life. So this is the concept whereby we want to inculcate when we talk about molecular and cellular biotechnology in helping us to maintain our healthy life by producing biotechnology products and biotechnology food products to have their impact on our life. So when we talk about food security survival, it can be achieved when all the drivers of food security being addressed for our needs and for our future generations. So when we talk about survival, we have to ensure that the food security can be maintained at the current state as well as for our new generations. We cannot allow the technology or the practices of achieving the current food security will jeopardize the food security for our future generation. How to maintain that? So this is a few drivers that we must ensure that we are understood to what are the importance of these particular drivers to be understood by each of the players or stakeholders that involved in the food system itself. So when we talk about the food system, to maintain the food security, it involves from the productions until processing and packaging the food, and then it can be distributed to the consumers, and then it can be consumed by at the end it can be consumed by all people, and also we need to maintain also the waste of the production. So this is what we call it as a food systems, the food system all about. It is from farm to our plate. So there are a few key drivers that should be understood. First is environmental drivers. For example, climate change, soil conditions, water condition, nutrient availability, and biodiversity of the plant, of the food sources actually. So environmental drivers is the drivers that are mostly being neglected by the people when we talk about the maintaining the food security survival. We tend to use we tend to do deforestation, for example, to plant our food to cater the needs of the people without thinking on the effects of climate change later on. And also when we talk about the environmental drivers, it is also should be considered also as from the natural drivers. Natural drivers, for example, the volcano, solar cycle, tides, and many more things. Other than that, on top of that also, this particular environmental have the what we call it as the field that whereby we have to make sure that all the activities that involve the environmental can maintain our environmental welfare. So it has to be managed, And then the second one is socio-economic drivers. So when we talk about to maintain the food system outcomes or to maintain the food security survival, the socio-economic drivers plays an important role in terms of the stability of the economy and the demographic features of the peoples and governments. For example, how does politics stability ensure the economy stability, and then also the government's policy that are toward the technology driven food security, and also not to forget about the cultures that we have. So all these particular socio-demographic drivers are a must to make sure that we can conserve the social welfare of the society. So all these particular drivers come together to make sure that the food system's outcome, which is food security, can be maintained using, and then also it is accessible and available to the society, to the people, and also we have to make sure that the utilizations is on the maximum capacity. So when we talk about the food security survival, actually, in order to plan sustainable, equitable, and healthy food systems for the future, we require an integrated and innovative analytical method and approaches from a range of disciplines, as well as an effective intersectoral policy analysis, and also the multi-stakeholders and engagement. It can be from the university, with the private sectors, with industrial players. So this is the challenges to human and planetary health. If you can see here, globally, this is before the pandemic, and this is before the pandemic. After the pandemic, it's more challenging. So globally, 850 million people around the world are in a state of hunger. Out of that, 38 million face food insecurity in 4 conflict-afflicted countries. And for example, Nigeria, Somalia, South Sudan, and Yemen. So from here also, 150 million, 55 million children under 5 are stunted, including our country. And then on top of that, also 2.1 billion are overweight or obese. 60% live in developing countries. So this is the challenges of the human and planetary health. There are a lot of challenges. Agriculture is pushing planetary boundaries, for example, in terms of climate change, in terms of land system changing, fresh water use, ocean acidification, and other things. So when we talk about the challenges, for example, this is the example of disruption to the food system, food environments, and diets. If you look at the change of the food system, from its production to the consumption and utilization, each of this particular stage is prone to have the threat to the food systems. So for example, heat and water stress, pests and diseases that we are facing with our crops, for example, during the production. It will cause the low production of yields and lowering the nutritional value that agricultural production or agricultural product that has been produced, regardless if it's plants or it is animals. So other than that, also during the storage, for example, pathogens, existence of pathogens, mycotoxins, can have the effect on the quality of the quality of agricultural product that we are producing. So we need the cold storage to increase. Cold storage is needed to lower down the food waste. And then when it comes to the market and retailing aspect, for example, there should be a control from the government in terms of food prices. When we use the technology to produce the new types of food or agricultural products. So we must think that the technology are not too much impact on the cost, and then it will increase the food price. If the food price is higher, even though the food can available to the people, it will lower down the accessibility to the food itself. And then the last one on the change of in the food change, the consumption and utilization. In this particular aspect, the consumption must be at the maximum. Don't allow the waste of the waste happen. If we look at the statistics, Malaysians also among the highest countries that produce the waste from the agriculture industries, hotels, catering services and whatnot, because of the consumptions are not at the maximum level. The demand is high, the production is high, the utilization is not at the maximum level. So, and then also we are going to also on top of that also intestinal nutrient absorption happen mostly throughout the recess and recess, and then we need top up the good nutrition for the people. So when we when I talk about the frozen zoo technology and also the food security survival, how to tailor the cellular and molecular technology to have a food security survival. Actually, when you want to tailoring the supply chain that I mentioned, from the production to the consumptions and the utilization, actually, when we talk about the health and wellness and also the sustainable diet, we have to think about we have to retrospect the process. We have to do a retrospective process, whereby we have to think how food being produced, how food being processed, how food being optimized for their nutrient content and sustainability. From this concept, we are trying to personalizing the nutrient by understanding the genetics and epigenetics of our people first. This can be done through the cellular and molecular technology that have been established in Planetiium. By understanding the needs of a certain population according to their genetics, we can formulate the technology that can predetermine the markers at the protein levels, at the proteomics level, at the metabolomics level, macrobiomics level. So we can observe the pro-disease states. For example, the obesity it is a condition to more comorbid diseases. For example, oxidative stress, inflammation, endothelial dysfunction, thrombosis, all these pro-disease states later on will develop the diseases, what we call it as diabetes, cardiovascular, hypertension, some cancers. This is all the non-communicable chronic diseases that are can be predetermined by observing the pro-disease state, which is obesity, oxidative stress, inflammations, endothelial dysfunction, and thrombosis. These particular pre-disease states are mostly come from the dietary choices. And the dietary choices, or the food that being consumed by our population, by our society. To observe that, we have to retrospective back on the changing the population behavior, the changing population behavior from our understanding from personalizing nutrition at the genetics level. And then we can produce the food, we can process the food, we can optimize the food for nutrient and the best nutrient content and for its sustainability to have the health and wellness and sustainable diet. So this is a few technology, and the few technology that can be ventured out by Planetiium later on when we talk about food security and food security. And for example, in meat analog productions, for example, they are using the biosynthesis pathway. And then an exporter of ham were introduced into the engineered E. coli, for example. The ham the ham degrading pathway and synthetic pathways of byproduct acetate and lactate were blocked. So we can get the benefit by the feed batch fermentations of the engineered strain secrete by ham, which can be added into the meat substitute to give it a better appearance, for example. Or in the technology of the CRISPR-R system, for example. There are a lot of examples that using CRISPR-R system, for example, lacto and neonitrous productions of the milk. It used the modular pathway engineering and was to balance to supply of two key precursors, the UDP and also UDP pathways. So with this particular technology, genetic circuit, modular engineering, synthetic scaffold, for example, protein engineering, expression fine-tuning. So all this can be built, can be tested, and be learned, and we have to design. And we design, and we build, and we test, and we learn from this particular exercising the cellular and molecular technology in the modulating the food system for a better outcome. So this is a few suggestions and prioritize policies for health and the environmental. For example, we must promote nutritious, sustainable, and healthy diets. So, for example, eliminate subsidies of nutrient-poor food, for example. Convert to investment for more nutritious crop. For example, vegetables. There are what we call it a nutrient-poor food. For example, all the fast food, all the unhealthy food that being subsidized, and convert to investment for more nutritious crops. Example, the vegetables. Under usual technologies, for example, beef and other ruminant account for 20 more land use and GHG, greenhouse gases emission that pulses per unit of protein consumed. So for using the better technologies in terms of molecular and cellular technology, for example, Brazil's carbon neutral beef and policy intervention has been introduced to make sure that the emission intensive food are being lowered down. Other than that, we can convert inefficient subsidies of unhealthy food and input to the support products of fruits, vegetables, and other nutrient-rich foods, and also provide income support vulnerable groups, including smallholders, women, and also youth. So this is the examples of how to create enabling environmental. We can close gender gap in agriculture, ensure agriculture technologies benefit women's, reform institutions to strengthen resource rights, enhance access to inputs and credit, for example, and then also encourage inclusive value change, support inclusive marketing in food value change. Example, India's improved dairy change, for example, strengthening rural-urban linkages to aid food security, nutrition, and also livelihoods, and also promote effective governance mechanisms by integrating, coordinating the relevant sectors, enhancing the monitoring and accountability with the data. Now we have a lack of the data pertaining the food security to our country. So consider a scientific platform for food system itself. For example, there are initiative by the French and Switzerland researchers, how they are combining three new genes, two from the daffodil genes and also one from the bacterium genes, and that helps into the produce provitamin A in the rice grown, what we call it as a golden rice. So using the cellular and molecular technology, we can enable the environments to be sustained, and then at the same time we can have the effect and the help on we can promote the technology, cellular and molecular technology, and being using, and at the same time we can conserve the environment. So with that, I think I end my presentation. Today I pass to Mr. Chairman, and then thank you for listening. And then I think I have to go now, and then the question might be posed to Dr. Redzuan and Dr. Tengku for further deliberation, inshallah. Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Muhammad, for the detailed presentation on how frozen zoo technology can be applied for food security survival, including how Planetiium can be applied in this topic. So next, we would like to proceed with the second topic of our webinar, which is the under-addressed threat to food security, climate change-induced plant-borne toxicity, which will be presented by Dr. Redzuan. A brief profile introduction of the presenter. Dr. Redzuan Nul Hakim obtained his doctoral degree from International Islamic University Malaysia, IIUM, in 2019. He is currently working as an assistant professor at the Department of Basic Medical Science, Kulliyah of Nursing, IIUM. The focus of his current work includes assessing environmental and lifestyle influences on reproductive performance and detrimental effects of toxicants or natural products on maternal and fetal development. He also focusing on developing medicinal efficacy studies on gaharu leaf for commercialization purpose. He is an active member of Malaysian Society of Toxicology and Laboratory Animal Science Association of Malaysia. So please welcome Dr. Redzuan.
All right. Thank you very much to Mr. Moderator for the kind well introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Before I proceed, do you able to see my screen?
Yes, Doctor.
All right. Right. So I'm Dr. Redzuan Nul Hakim bin Abdul Razak from the Department of Basic Medical Science, School of Nursing, and also my another affiliation is the Institute of Planetary Survival for Sustainable Wellbeing of Planetiium. And I would like to thank to Planetiium for organizing this webinar on food security, which is the issue of food security it should be highlighted, okay, to the community in order to make sure that our community aware about the importance of food security currently and also for our future. And in this sharing, this going to be it's like a sharing session. It's not going to be a lecture, because I'm going to share based on my readings, and I would like to throw this kind of issue to the audience, so that we can think about our food security, and also what are the impacts of the climate change can do to our food security. So basically, the title of my presentation or my sharing is the under-addressed threat to food security, climate change-induced plant-borne toxicity. And looking at the title of my sharing, yesterday we had the Malaysian Congress of Toxicology in IIUM, and based on the Congress, I saw that the issue of the food security and also how the food security can be related to the toxicity is something that is lack to be discussed among the toxicologists. So actually, this issue of plant-borne toxicity, okay, is very important to be discussed. Somehow it will affect, okay, our well-being and also our health. Somehow when we consume the plant or the vegetables that contain any toxic, somehow it will compromise our health and also our environment. And in this sharing, I'm going to talk on the plant-based diet, climate change, food security, food safety for food security, plant adaptation to climate change, and the last one, which is the focus or the highlight of my presentation, which is the plant-borne toxicity. And for the plant-based diets, so I'm not going to talk too much on this one, because it's not actually, this is not my forte to discuss about this. And just to highlight, okay, with regard to the plant, so plant-based diet is like the high consumptions of fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, and unsaturated vegetable oils, and lower or no consumption of animal products and processed foods. So this is the technical definition of the plant-based diet. So the plant-based diet is something that is good to have this kind of plant-based diet, but we have to make sure that the plant-based diet that we are practicing is something that is healthy by the way of we cook the plants to be eaten. And if we look into the population, okay, the statistic, okay, the statistic of the practice of the plant-based diet, the highest population that practicing the plant-based diet is in India. Okay, around 30 to 40% of the population of India, they are practicing the plant-based diet, followed by the countries of the Europe, for example, the Italy, the UK, and also the Germany, and also the Netherlands. So we see that this kind of statistic indicates the future, or how people throughout the world practicing this kind of plant-based diets. And if you look into the literature, the trend of people choosing plant as their main diets is in the increasing pattern. So it means it's very good to have this kind of plant-based diet, because, okay, first one, it can promote, okay, the healthy life. Okay, it can reduce the non-communicable diseases, for example, the cardiovascular diseases, the obesity, the diabetics, and also it can reduce the cholesterol level. And in fact, okay, by having this kind of plant-based diet is very important for our planetary health. Okay, it will lower the greenhouse gas emissions, and also at the same time, it will reduce the land use, the use of the fresh water, and also the use of and also it will reduce the water pollution. So moving on to the another component of my sharing is the climate change. So climate change is defined as attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere, and which is in addition to natural climate variability observed over comparable time periods. And if you look into the definition of the climate change, it regards to the human activity, or we can say the anthropogenic activities. So it's due to the human hands, so that can cause the direct or indirect effect or results to the environment. Somehow, if we look into this figure, okay, the climate change somehow can lead to the extreme weather level, and also it will cause the natural calamities or natural catastrophes, for example, the cyclone, tsunami, and monsoon. And the one that I would like to highlight here is the extreme weather events, for example, the flood, the drought, the increased the world temperature, and also the heat wave. And if you look into this, the snapshot of this figure, okay, from 2001 until 2021, Malaysia lost about 29% of its recovery, which could lead to the consequences of accelerated climate change, global warming, soil erosion, and flooding. So if you look into this scenario, actually we are experiencing the outcome or the consequences of our hands. Okay, we do the deforestation. Okay, there are many things that we do to the environment somehow can lead to the climate change. So we have to keep on aware of this situation to make sure that we're able to preserve our environment to lessen the impact of the climate change to the environment. And if you look into the world temperature, the global world temperature, okay, there's the scientists forecasting that the average increase of the world temperature is ranging from 1 to 1.8 degrees Celsius to 4 degrees Celsius. And in fact, the concentration or the concentration of the atmospheric carbon dioxide, somehow it can increase up to 500 to 1,000 ppm, okay, by the year 2100. So we can see that the implications of the human activity to the environment, somehow it will can indirectly affect, okay, the well-being of the human and also the other creatures. And for the food security, I'm not going to discuss more on the food security because already being explained by Dr. Muhammad, well explained by Dr. Muhammad. So in this food security, I would like to highlight the 4 dimensions of the food security. The first one is the availability, the stability, accessibility, and the utilization. And these are the 4 dimensions, okay, that is like, because we know that the food security is an overarching concept that cover all the aspects of the foods. And I would like to emphasize here another thing that we have to highlight here when we talk about the food security is about the food safety as something that being least concerned and also least highlighted by the population, especially by the various stakeholders. Okay, so when we talk about the food security, is something related to availability, accessibility, stability, and utilization. So how the food security can relate to our food security. So there's 2 different terms here, the food safety and also the food security. So food safety, how food safety can contribute to the food security. Okay, with regard to the issue of the climate change, here when we are discussing now, okay, about the issue of the climate change, how this climate change can impair, okay, the food safety, which in turn can affect and can negatively affect our food security. So the climate change can give the negative impacts on the plant physiology. So it will affect how the plants behave, okay, the growth of the plants. So the plants have to change their metabolism, their physiology in order to adapt, okay, with the extreme environment. And another issue that we have to focus when we talk about how the climate change can affect our environment and also our plants is how this plant can develop certain kind of toxic metabolites that can be in part or can be transferred to the human when we consume the plants that contain certain kind of toxic constituents. And when we expose to these two elements of the outcomes of the climate change to the plants, it will raise, or we highlight the issue of the safety issues of consuming the plant crops. So as I mentioned just now, if we regard to the plant-based diet, we can see the increasing pattern of the population to shift their diet into plant-based diets. And in fact, we know that consuming plant is very good practice, or very good way of it's very good to our body. So how this kind of safety issues by consuming the plant crops can jeopardize or can compromise the way we are eating the plant-based diet. And when we talk about the safety issues of the consuming plant crops, somehow it will compromise, it will negatively affect the food security. And I would like to highlight here, I would like to show here is how the climate change can indirectly affect the food security of our population. So it's something, it's indirect, something that we can see, we cannot see through the direct aspect, but somehow the climate change can indirectly affect our food security when we are exposing to the plant that containing certain kind of toxicity, certain kind of toxics. So the food safety, this element of food safety also should be incorporated in these 5 SDGs, the zero hunger, the good health and well-being, clean water and sanitation, responsible consumption and production, and also the climate action. Now we're moving on to the how the plant can adapt to the climate change. Okay, we know that when we expose to certain kind of extreme environment or extreme situation, we have to have certain kind of mechanism to adapt with this certain specific extreme environment. So same goes to the plants. Okay, all plants have their mechanism to adapt to certain kind of extreme environment, for example, the climate change. And when we talk about the adaptation, somehow it will relate to the certain changes that will happen to the environment, sorry, to the plants, okay, especially in the metabolism, in the gene expression, and also in the physiological elements of the plants. So when we talk about the plant adaptation, it should be started with the gene expression patterns. So somehow it will affect the genes expression in the plants, and will in turn can cause the certain changes, or will alter the metabolic level of the plants. And we know that the changes and also the expression of the genes, it varies, it depends on the species, and also it depends on the stress that plants that are facing. And if you look into the cascading or the cascades of the plant response to abiotic stress. So the abiotic stress, yeah, there's something that we talk about now is the climate change. So the climate change is will cause certain kind of abiotic stress to the plants. And another element that I would like to highlight here with regard to the how plant adapt to the climate change, okay, is about the production of the allergenic proteins, okay, as a mechanism, as a means for the protection. So these plants, okay, in order to adapt, okay, with the abiotic stress, okay, they will form certain kind of allergenic proteins. Okay, this protein allergic to the humans and also other creatures as a means of their protection to defend themselves from this kind of abiotic stress. And another issue that I would like to highlight here as an example of the how plant adapt to the climate change is the how plant responses under drought stress. Okay, the prolonged drought. Okay, the prolonged drought somehow can cause certain changes to the plants. Okay, in terms of morphological changes, the biochemical changes, and also the molecular changes. And we know that this kind of changes, okay, for example, the reduced leaf area, the stem length, okay, the increase in antioxidative enzyme in the plants, and also it will increase expression of certain protein and also genes in order for the plants to cope with the drought stress. And we know that this kind of adaptation is very important to the plants, okay, is very important for the plants in order for them to normalize their function under the extreme environment, and also to deal with the unfavorable conditions. All right, so we're moving on to our focus now, okay, on the issue of how the climate change can induce, okay, the plant-borne toxicity in the plant-borne toxicity. How this single aspect, how this element of climate change or the abiotic stress can make the plants that we are going to consume is somehow less safe, right? So in this presentation, or in this sharing, I would like to highlight 5 elements of toxicity, okay, that can jeopardize, okay, the safety of the plants that to be consumed by the population. So the first one is the climate change can promote, okay, the hyperaccumulation of heavy metals in the staple crops, okay, and then followed by the overuse of the pesticides. So somehow the overusage of the pesticide can cause the accumulation of the residues of the pesticides in the plants. And what will happen when we consume the plants that is not properly being washed? Okay? So somehow the residues of the pesticide can be ingested together when we are consuming the plants that did not being properly washed. And another element of the toxicity jeopardize the plant's safety is the elevating or increasing of the toxic secondary metabolite production by the plants as a means of protection from the abiotic stress. And another issue is about the presence or the increased incidence of antibiotic resistant bacteria infection when we are consuming the leafy green vegetables. And another issue that I would like to highlight here is going to be most of the toxicologists, especially the food toxicologists, they are focusing now, okay, about the emergence and also the heightened cases of fungal infection and mycotoxins in the plants, and especially the emergence of the mycotoxin is in new regions. Okay, we know that certain it depends on the geographical distribution, and somehow the climate change can cause the emergence of the mycotoxin in new regions that normally do not have any kind of mycotoxin infections. So I'm going to moving on to the first one, the heavy metal accumulation. Right. So we know that most of the plants, okay, they have the ability, okay, to absorb, okay, to absorb the heavy metals, okay, but is still under the acceptable limits. Somehow, okay, when this plant exposed to climate change, okay, it will change the ability of the accumulation of the heavy metal by the plants. And we know that some of the plants somehow has the exhibit the hyperaccumulative activity of the heavy metal. That's why certain plants can be used to accumulate, okay, to cure certain soil or certain land, okay, from certain heavy metal, because they have the ability to accumulate or to absorb certain heavy metals. So with regard to heavy metal accumulation, the first one I would like to highlight is about the arsenic. Okay. And increasing temperature up to 30 degrees Celsius can promote the migration of the arsenic from the roots to the whole grains. Right? So we can see here, okay, by having this kind of increasing temperature, okay, due to the climate change, okay, can cause the migration of arsenic, okay, from the roots to the whole grains. So we know that the grains is something that be consumed by the population. So accidentally, okay, this kind of heavy metal, which is the arsenic, okay, will be consumed by the population. Okay, another issue that I would like to highlight is about the arsenic is the uptake by the plants, okay, especially the arsenic, okay, under the elevated oil temperatures, and also the increased arsenic concentration in rice grains. Okay, we know that rice is a staple food, okay, especially for our country, Malaysia. So we know that certain rice, okay, rice grains can accumulate the arsenic. somehow under the exposure of high temperature, okay, this rice grain increase their ability to accumulate the arsenic. So what will happen to the to our health when we consume, when we accumulate, okay, arsenic into our body? So somehow it will affect our health. And another heavy metal that I would like to highlight here is about titanium. Right? So under elevated CO2 condition or under a high CO2 concentration, okay, it will lead to the higher bioaccumulation of nano titanium oxide in the rice grains. Okay, so this titanium also similar to the arsenic, somehow we can is something that be consumed. Okay, the rice grain is something be consumed by the population. Okay, most of the population consuming the rice, so somehow this titanium can accumulate, okay, inside the population. And another issue I would like to highlight with regard to heavy metal accumulation is the acid rain. So acid rain is you can say it's like the consequences of the climate change. So these acid rains can increase the risk of heavy metal when this can raise the increase of heavy metal finding their way, okay, to the food chain after heavy precipitation episodes. Okay, so this acid rain, we know the acids containing acid rain containing certain kind of acids. Okay, for example, the hydrogen sulfide, okay, the nitric acids. Okay, so this kind of acids, okay, can will enter into the environment. Okay, it will available on inside the soil. So what will happen to this the soil pH? Okay, somehow it will reduce. Okay, the soil pH becomes more acidic. Okay, the soil pH becomes more acidic, and this high acidity of the soil can escalate or can heighten the bioavailability and mobilization of heavy metals into the plants. So somehow these acid rains can facilitate, okay, can escalate, okay, the migration of the heavy metal into the plants, okay, regardless of any plants. So we can see how this climate change can increase the accumulation of the heavy metal inside the plants, especially the vegetables. And we're moving on to the next one. Okay, so the non-toxic sediments into toxic soils. Okay, so when we are talking about the sediments, okay, sediments is like the something that is settled down, okay, after certain kind of after flood, okay, after flood. Okay, so during the flood season or during the flood seasons, okay, the heavy metal being washed away. Okay, we know that most of the agricultural environment, agricultural lands, okay, they are using certain kinds of pesticide that containing heavy metal. Inside, the heavy metal is can be found ubiquitously inside our environment. Some of the heavy metal can be deposited from the rains, from the environment, from the atmospheric air. So this heavy metal will be washed away, okay, by the flowing water during the flood, and somehow it can pollute the river. But the most tragic or the most tragic situation is after the flood, okay, during the drought. Okay, what will happen to the sediments that being bring by the floods? So this sediment can transform into the soils, and what will happen to the soil? So we know that these sediments contains certain kind of heavy metal, high in heavy metal. So somehow the soil, the heavy metal inside the soil, okay, is increased, and it will increase the heavy metal availability in the environment, and it will put risk to the flora and fauna of the river valley ecosystem. And if we look into this figure, okay, how this the flood, okay, during the flood and after the flood, which is the drought, okay, can change, okay, the demographic and also the quality of the soils. Okay, during the floods, okay, there is a non-toxic sediments, because there's non-toxic sediments only exposed, okay, only available inside the water of the river. Somehow after the droughts, okay, it will cause the sediment to transform into the soil. Somehow it will, this heavy metal can toxic can intoxicate the soils and will increase the heavy metal availability in the environment. And the next one is the pollen allergenicity. Okay, you know that in the country, for example, in Europe, okay, and also in the United States, okay, they are having this kind of issues, the pollen season. Okay, the pollen season. Okay, we know that this pollen okay, allergenicity can cause respiratory allergies and also contact dermatitis. And somehow some of us mentioning that, okay, this kind of pollen allergenicity is not like a big issues of the health. Somehow it can lead, okay, especially for the respiratory allergies, okay, it can cause the allergy to the respiratory system, and it will impair, okay, the ability for the individuals to breathe, and also it will affect the somehow it can cause certain kind of allergy reaction to the whole body, okay, following the respiratory allergies. And with regard to the pollen allergy, okay, I would like to bring three literatures here, okay, that already being discussed as early as in 2006, okay, by the Rogers et al. In 2006, okay, mentioning that, okay, high CO2 concentration in the environment, okay, especially in the atmosphere, can increase the pollen production by 32% and 55% respectively compared with ambient CO2 level. Okay, they use this kind of pollen, which is the redwood pollen, okay, in order to predict, okay, what will happen when they increase the temperature of the when they increase the level of CO2, okay, to the production of the pollen. So the production of the pollen expected to increase, okay, significantly under the predicted future climate change or climate condition. And then another study produced by Zhang et al. In 2015 mentioning that the pollen season, changes of pollen season timing and airborne level depends on latitude and are associated with changes of growing degree days, frost-free days, and precipitation. So these are the abiotic stress, okay, the growing degree, the precipitation, okay, can cause, okay, the changes in the pollen season timing. So they cannot predict when the pollen season will happen in the near future. So somehow it's going to be an unpredictable situation for them. So it will be difficult for them to be prepared, okay, to face certain kind of pollen season. And I would like to highlight here also this study by by Kelly 2014, okay, mentioning that the increased levels of individual flavonoids metabolites were found under elevated CO2 and or droughts. So this level of flavonoids, okay, the level of flavonoids in the plants, okay, somehow can hasten or can escalate, can increase the level of pollen production by that certain plants, that particular plants under the exposure of elevated CO2 and also during the drought. The next one is overuse of pesticide, right? So we know that pesticide is something that being used, okay, by largely being used by the agriculture sector in order to increase the crop production. Okay, we know that this production of the crops can be increased by the use of pesticides. Okay, and certain pesticides already being banned, okay, to be used because it can cause certain kind of the toxic, okay, to the plants and also toxic to the handlers and also to the users. So how this overuse of pesticide, okay, can cause certain kind of toxic plant-borne toxicity. Okay, if we look at the element of the climate change, the first one is the elevated temperature. So elevated temperature can cause migration of pests. Okay, what will happen? So somehow, if we look during my presentation for the overuse of pesticide, we can see that the element of climate change can indirectly, okay, cause, okay, the accumulation of pesticide residues in the plants. Okay, can cause accumulation pesticide residues in the plant. It's indirect effect. Okay, indirect effect of the climate change. So elevated temperature, what will happen to the pests? Okay, during the elevated temperature, the pests will migrate to the new areas. Okay, they will migrate to the new areas. They will increase their number of population and they will increase the metabolic rates of the indigenous pests. Okay, and at the same time, under the elevated temperature, what will happen to the pesticide? So the pesticide will increase their volatilization and degradation. So what will happen to the the concentration of the pesticide that being used. So somehow it can increase the use of the pesticide. And with regard to the rising of CO2 level, okay, rising CO2 levels somehow can cause the dilution of pesticide concentrations in plants. And at the same time, it will cause the sensitivity, reduced sensitivity of certain pests to the pesticide. And rising CO2 also can cause reduce the sensitivity of weeds to certain herbicides and also increase feeding by insects to meet the required carbon to nitrogen ratios. So this rising CO2 level can cause the pesticide efficacy, can compromise the pesticide efficacies that being used to kill certain pests. So what will happen later? Okay, we see later. And then the next one is the high precipitation. Okay, means over-raining, high precipitation. It can increase the herbicide dilution. So when there is high precipitation, the level of pesticide concentration in the environment will be diluted, and it will leach into the groundwater or it will run off from the soil. So what will happen? And the last one is the drought. Okay, during the drought season, it will cause the changing in the foliar morphology of the plants. Okay, the changing in the foliar morphology of the plants, and it will cause the plants to be more resistant and to be more it will cause the plant to be more resistant to the pesticide, and at the same time will decrease the effective volumes of the herbicides. So I would like to see here is about the pesticide and also the herbicides. And before I'm moving on to the next one, I would like to highlight about the pests. Okay, pests is something the creatures that have the ability to adapt and persist with the climate change. We can say that's the plasticity of the pest. Okay, the plasticity of the pest. So this pest able to accommodate well, okay, with the changes of the environment, the extreme environment, and this can be associated with the genetic changes. And following those kind of climate change that can cause the low efficacy of the pesticide, what will happen? And the farmers will increase the use of pesticide in order to kill the pests. So we know that pesticide being used to increase the crop production. So in order to make sure that they're able to attain, okay, the crop production that being estimated or that being expected, so they have to increase the use of pesticide. And another issue that we have to be aware here is the use of illicit or adulterated pesticide that already being banned to be used. Somehow some of the farmers, in order to make sure that they're able to cater with the demand of the crops, okay, they will use illegal, they will illegally use certain pesticide that already being banned by the authorized bodies. And what will happen when there is increase in the pesticide use, the use of illicit pesticide, somehow it will increase the pesticide residues in the crops. Okay, so it will increase the pesticide residues in the crop, which in turn can cause the endocrine disruption, cancer, reproductive disorders, neurodegenerative, and also epigenetic changes to the human or to the population that consuming the plants that contain high pesticide residues in the crops. So this the indirect effects of the climate change to the use of pesticide towards the safety of the vegetable and also the plants. So the next one is mycotoxin. So the mycotoxin, before I'm going to touch on this the text with regard to the mycotoxins, I would like to go through the how climate change can be a driving factor for the mycotoxin production. So we know that climate change, okay, it causes certain changes in the abiotic factors. For example, the water activity, the temperature, and also the atmospheric CO2 concentration. And these three abiotic factors is very important. It's very important for the mycotoxin or for the fungal growth. It will produce the favorable condition for the fungal to grow. And we know that certain fungus can have this kind of mycotoxigenic that is very dangerous to the health of the population. And these abiotic factors, not only these abiotic factors also can be not only the abiotic factors, the improper storage and poor agricultural practices also can lead to the increase in the fungal growth. So what will happen when this climate change, the abiotic factors of the climate change produce the favorable condition for the fungal growth? It will lead to the increase of the production of mycotoxin in the plants. So somehow it will cause the population to be highly exposed to the mycotoxin. All right. So we go into the how the climate change can cause the increase in the mycotoxin. So the first one is the water activity, temperature, and also elevated CO2. Okay, has a minimal effects on the aspergillus growth, but it can cause the significant change in the aflatoxin biosynthetic gene expression and can significantly stimulate the production of aflatoxin B1. So this water activity, temperature, and elevated CO2 unable to promote the growth of aspergillus. But we have to look another issues that is very important, which is it can cause changes in the gene expression that are responsible for the aflatoxin production. Okay, so somehow the high water activity, high temperature, elevated CO2 can increase the production of aflatoxin B1. And aflatoxin B1 is predicted to heavily contaminate the maize in Europe, especially under +2 degrees Celsius climate change scenario. So we see that another study showed that the aflatoxin B1 is predicted to increase to contaminate the maize in Europe under the exposure of +2 degrees Celsius climate change. And you have to aware that the fungus, it seems to the pest. Fungus has the ability to be well adapt to the environmental changes, and environmental stress, whereby they're able to rapidly evolve, to adapt to and also to dominate crop ecosystem under climate stress. So here I just put here the examples of the mycotoxins, that can cause that's very harmful to the humans. For example, the fumonisin, aflatoxin, ochratoxin, deoxynivalenol, and also the zearalenol. Right. So these the issues of how the climate change can increase the exposure to the mycotoxin. Moving on to the next one, the presence of the toxic metabolites. The increase of the production of the plant metabolites. So we know that in the plants, they have the primary metabolites and also secondary metabolites. So secondary, so I would like to highlight here is the secondary metabolite, because one of the roles of the secondary metabolite is for the protection of the plants. It's very important for the protection of the plant. So in order to discuss the toxic plant metabolites, I have two plants that I would like to highlight here. The first one is the poison ivy or Toxicodendron radicans. So this poison ivy, so from the name, it's already named as a poison ivy. So this poison ivy can cause the contact dermatitis, contact dermatitis or skin dermatitis. And what will happen, under the elevated atmospheric CO2, under the exposure of elevated CO2, how this can implicate the growth of the poison ivy. The goodness, the first one I would like to highlight the goodness of the atmospheric CO2. Elevated atmospheric CO2, the poison ivy. So this elevated atmospheric CO2 to the poison ivy, because the high photosynthesis activity in the poison ivy, it will increase the efficiency of the water used by the poison ivy. The poison ivy can grow well under the elevated CO2 temperature and this atmospheric CO2, and at the same time it will increase the population biomass. The size of the poison ivy can be expanded or can increase under the exposure of elevated atmospheric CO2. So this is the one that I'm not going to indicate in this presentation. The one that I have to be aware is this one. The presence of abundant and toxic urushiol. So this toxic urushiol is very toxic. It's very dangerous, very harmful to the human. It can cause this kind of contact dermatitis. So under the elevated atmospheric CO2, so this urushiol, the toxic constituents of the poison ivy, which is the urushiol, can increase in the production and affect. And in fact, this kind of urushiol, okay, the level of toxicity of urushiol can increase under the elevated atmospheric CO2. Okay, so there are two elements here. So the abundance and also the toxic level of the urushiol. So under the elevated CO2 atmospheric level, okay, the production of urushiol will be elevated, and at the same time, the one that we afraid is the level of toxicity of urushiol when we expose to this kind of toxic metabolites. And this is another study by Ziska 2007. It's already is an old study. It's 2007. Okay, it's already being highlighted. Okay, with regard to the poison ivy. Okay, they estimate that the more the CO2, okay, it will meaning that okay, the growth of the poison ivy will be increased. So the size of the poison ivy will be increased. So what will happen to the toxic metabolites, which is the urushiol in the poison ivy? So the level of the toxic oil, okay, by the poison ivy will increase. Okay, it means that it will directly increase the level of toxic oil in the poison ivy. And another thing that I mentioned just now, the one that we afraid is the level of toxicity of urushiol. How toxic the level of urushiol when the increase in the production and also in the size of the poison ivy. And another one I would like to highlight the toxic plant metabolites is this one, okay, the cassava, okay, or in Malay we call ubi kayu, okay, ubi kayu, okay, the cassava. Okay, so cassava we know that is a major staple food. It's a major staple food, especially for the people in the African continent. Okay, most of the around 35 to 50% of the people in the African continent, they are consuming this cassava. Okay, it's a major staple food for them, and because we know that cassava is very is one of the efficient producer for the carbohydrates, and cassava is very vital for the production of the calories. So with regard to the cassava, okay, there is a study mentioned by the Brown 2016. Okay, under the elevated temperature and prolonged droughts, okay, the foliar and tuber toxicity of this cassava can be increased. Okay, meaning that the level of cassava will increase. So somehow it will cause certain kind of toxic. Okay, so the problem with the cassava is about the production of the cyanide. Okay, so the production of the cyanide. So this cyanide can cause certain kind of toxic to the human. So the elevated temperature and also CO2 level will produce tuber cyanide concentration similar to the high level found in plants grown at ambient conditions. So we know that the hydrogen cyanide, okay, hydrogen cyanide is a byproduct. Okay, hydrogen cyanide is a byproduct of cyanide glycosides, okay, that are available inside the tuber and also the leaf of the cassava. So when this leaf and tuber exposed to any mechanical damage or certain kind of threats, okay, this cyanogenic glycoside, okay, will be converted into the hydrogen cyanide, and this hydrogen cyanide can cause certain toxic to the human and also to the animals. And if you look into this figure, okay, here, okay, there is this figure is from this picture is from the Africa. Okay, so as I mentioned, this cassava is a major staple food for the people in Africa. And if you look here, one of the effects of the consuming cassava containing hydrogen cyanide, it will cause the conzo paralysis. It's a permanent paralysis of the leg. Okay, if you look here, there's a permanent paralysis of the leg. So it's called as a conzo paralysis. So this hydrogen cyanide can cause, so there is high number of population in African having this kind of conzo paralysis due to the exposure to the hydrogen cyanide. So people in Africa, they have to be aware that under the exposure of climate change, somehow it can increase the production of hydrogen cyanide, meaning that they have to properly wash and properly pre-wash, okay, the tuber and also the leaf of the cassava before consuming and before use for cooking. So we're moving on to the last part, okay, the plant pathogenic bacteria. Okay, so how the global warming, how the climate change can cause the increase of the plant pathogenic bacteria in the plants. So global warming, okay, was positively correlated with the increase of antimicrobial resistance of the 3 common pathogens. And we know that the different stress condition already known to affect the phytopathogens that could induce resistant or persistent cell formation. So this recurrence, okay, so by what means, okay, this plant pathogenic, for example, the antimicrobial resistant pathogen can be introduced to the human, okay. So this is how the contact, okay, how human will expose to the plant pathogenic bacteria that known to be increased in the production, increase in the level under the exposure of the global warming. So people will expose to the environment, okay, for example, for the plants, okay, from the water irrigation, okay. We know that in the environment we have the Salmonella, the Serratia, the Enterobacter, and also the Enterococcus. Okay, by these flies, and it will bring this kind of pathogenic bacteria to the vegetables or to the crops. And what will happen? So the human will consume, okay, the plants that is not properly washed, okay, and somehow it can cause certain kind of diseases. And for example, okay, there is an outbreak of diseases caused by the E. coli, Salmonella, and Shigella in the United States and Europe, resulted from consumption of the leafy green vegetables. Right? So we come to the last part of my presentation, the take-home message. So from my presentation, okay, I would like to highlight here the frequent extreme weather events brought by climate change heighten toxicity in crops, and somehow it can compromise the food security. So we have to make sure that, okay, we have to tackle the root problem of these issues. Okay, the root one is the extreme environment, the climate change. So meaning that we have to change our behavior to our environment. So we have to minimize, and also we have to at least minimize, okay, the damage that we do to the environment, because when we increase the damage to the environment, it can cause the climate change, and somehow it can increase the toxic of in the crops, okay, and it will cause it will compromise the food security. And the next one is ensuring food security under a climate change requires key adaptation strategies. So everyone has to take part, okay, in making sure that the food security something can be under the stable situation. So we have to know what are the adaptation strategies. So by using the current technology, okay, how we can adapt with this kind of situation, okay, using the molecular techniques and also the molecular tools in order to make sure that we're able to adapt to this kind of situation. And the last one, there's an urgent call, okay, to the various stakeholders, especially, okay, to have the more interdisciplinary research and also concerted efforts in order to better understand and address the challenges of climate change and the food safety. All right. So I hope that this take-home message can able to be disseminated to as much as possible of our population, to make sure that we aware about how the climate change can jeopardize the food security through the plants that we are consuming. Yeah, so that's all from me. This is the references that I'm using for my presentation. All right, with that, I end my presentation. Thank you very much. And I hope that my presentation can open up, okay, our vision, okay, and our understanding towards this kind of issues. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Redzuan, for the great insight on how climate change can directly and indirectly induce the plant-borne toxicity. So before going into the third topics, I would like to remind all participants to register your attendance by clicking on the I attend link given in the checkbox. Next, for our third topics, personally, I would consider this to be something straight out of a science fiction movie or novel, which is the topic of lab-grown meat, a cheap yet quality alternative protein. To briefly introduce the speaker, Dr. Tengku Faris obtained his PhD in stem cell research in the United Kingdom. He is a keen researcher specializing in disease modeling using stem cells. He is interested in understanding molecular mechanism genetic diseases. His work revolves around making organoids in a dish from reprogrammed pluripotent stem cells to recapitulate organogenesis. He is currently integrating the CRISPR-Cas9 system to correct mutations. With his experience, he envisioned that the stem cell research can be manipulated to accelerate production of biosynthetic organs as well as next-generation foods. So please welcome Dr. Tengku Faris.
Thank you very much, Mr. Said. Faris, for a very good introduction. I suppose this is the last part of the session for today, and I try to be quick in my slide or presentation materials. And I have to admit that I am not a food technologist, rather I'm a stem cell scientist. So not also what we call it, tissue engineer to do this. And of course, this is the things that we are not started yet in our facility. And of course, this is the things that we foresee and also we will try to do in the future, inshallah. So let me introduce myself. I'm a quite new lecturer in UIA and the Department of Basic Medical Science, and at the same time working in the Planetiium as a stem cell scientist. So my work currently focusing on manipulating the stem cells to make a new organs, and also in the future, perhaps we can manipulate this technology for food security. Moving on, the focus for today is the CM, which is the cultured meat, and whether we can regard this or we can use this as an alternative cheap protein. And the second part, I will introduce the culture methods in the lab, what we can do, and also the current technology. And after that, the future outlook of what we can do in the next coming 10 years. So there are lots of things that have been discussed and also come out in the media, but not in Malaysia. I think we've never seen this type of alternative protein in the form of meat or lab-grown meat in the media or anywhere in Malaysia. And I suppose this is all taken from the Europes or the United States or Singapore. So they are quite advanced in terms of manipulating this stem cell technology for food security. And when we mention about the cultured meat, it's also been referred as the cultivated meat. Some people or publication, they regard this as an in vitro or lab-grown meat, clean meat, meat of the future, super meat. There are lots of terminology that arise since 2013. I think that's the first time when this technology was first brought, and it's firstly patented by a group of researchers in Israel. So this is quite new technology, I suppose. And if I ask you whether or not you have the gut to try, the lab version of the meat, and why do we really need this? For our own consumption. So we in the Planetiium or the sustainability point of view, we look seriously into this issue, and hopefully we can use our expertise and technology in order to make this happen. Although this is quite difficult. And you know that the muscle cells, okay, they are composed of 90% of muscle fibers, 10% of connective tissues plus fat tissues, and 0.3% of blood. So that's the composition of the meat actually, and that was published in 2016, where they reported that the first cultured meat that ever produced, it cost over 350K for one single burger patty. So that's quite exaggerating there. So it's quite expensive, but now they have reduced almost 90% of the cost, and it can cost around $11 per kilogram of the meat. And what is cultured meat? Cultured meat is a real meat, real animal meat. They are not the plant-based or not made from cellulose or any plants. and they are fed with a mixture of nutrients. So we isolate these real cells from the animals. We bring them into the lab and we feed them with the culture media that contains all the growth factors and nutrients, and then the cells can proliferate. So the biopsy taken from these animals is only 100K thousands, okay, 100K cells. So it's not that much, not even 1 million, because it can cause a severe, or maybe it can lead to infection if we take more than that. So approaches to this clean meat production involve the cultivation of the skeletal muscle cells, but often in this muscle cell, we have the combination of fat, some fibroblasts, some connective tissues, chondrocytes, and the most important thing is the blood vessel, which is supplying the oxygen for the tissue to grow. So when we talk about the cultured meat, it's not only muscle fibers, it's a combination of few other tissue too. So let's go to the definition. So when we talk about the cultured meat, we cannot run away from taking this definition into consideration. Okay, we will talk about the cell lines. It means where is the source of these cells? Are they taken from the chicken? Are they taken from the shrimp? Are they taken from the cow, or are they taken from the pork? So you need to be careful what type of cell lines that you're gonna take, because the good source of cell will determine the end product. The second thing is the scaffolding. Of course, the cells have a limited capability for them to grow like the real meat. So with the advance of the tissue engineering, we can fabricate the scaffold in order to direct the cells to make the real meat structure. The third one is the tissue engineering, same like the scaffold fabrication. It uses lots of growth factors, microenvironments, niches in order to support the 3D system or the 3D architecture of the meat. Cell culture media is the most commonly discussed issues when we're dealing with the cultivated meat, because it's very expensive, and most of these cell culture media are composed of fetal bovine serum, or FBS, which is not so good for pet lovers. We will go into detail for that. And finally, the bioprocess design. So most of the startups that rise since 2013, they are focusing on a specific areas. Some companies, they are only focusing on manufacturing the cell culture media, while the others focusing on differentiation and also cultivation of these cell lines. So when in the context of social, we can see that people are somehow they're reluctant to eat. If I ask people or the attendees here, are you willing to take this as an alternative form of protein in your daily diet? So maybe only 10%, or maybe none of you will go for this alternative. I can show that. But in some other countries, they think that the world population keep on increasing, like 9.7 billion in 2050. So these lead to the projected food production increases of 70%. So maybe in the next 10 to 20 years, we don't have enough food sources. So we now need to start working on how to replace, how we can secure our food. All right. So regardless whether the consumer happy or not, we still need to produce or find some other solution for this food scarcity. So the media coverage also plays an important role, because some people who are vegetarian, of course, when they're writing the publication or the articles in the media, maybe they will object this idea. While some other people like me, maybe I can yes, go for it. You can, buy it. It's cheap. It's easy to do. So this is a contradicting views between the people in the media as well as in our community. The third one, which is the religious, is also important to note that different religions have different views on this. So I will try to, with my limited knowledge, I will try to discuss on this too. Regulation, we have very limited regulation on safeguarding the safety for the humans, and also how to prohibit these startup company for making, recipes for making cultivated meats that are dangerous or harmful to humans. And finally, the economical impact. So why do you really need the cultured meat? As I mentioned earlier, the population keep rising every year. So the demand is there, and also we need to, supply the alternative food, because we are lacking of these animals, because the animals will suffer from this. They are, might be infected with the zoonotic diseases. We have issues with the climate. We have environmental stress. So all these issues or factors can reduce or can hamper the food sources. So if you look here in the slide down there, I've also put that a preliminary life cycle assessment of the CM production suggested that compared with conventional meat production, the cultivated meat consume less energy, which is 45%, 99% less land because it's been made in the lab. We require 96% less water, and it emits 96% fewer greenhouse gas emissions. So very wonderful thought on that. And why do people oppose these ideas? Why do some people, maybe they don't like this idea of eating cultured meat, even though some of the companies say or declare this is a clean meat? They put all the advertisement and they claim, okay, this is clean. This is being made under GMP grade facility, clean. I mean, 100% clean, but still, the people's acceptance still a big issues. They claim that this is unnatural. This is not natural because you are making, like a robot meat or in the lab. So this is not natural. It's against the normal development. Number two is instrumentalizing animals. You are slaughtering the animals, but for Muslim, maybe this is a different way of perspective. The third one is not a genuine social change. Some people say that this is not really a need for the future because they can, meet all these cows or all these goats in a good amount and keep on feeding them with their another food or alternative. And then this is also being claimed as a high technology and commonly associated with the dangerous or harmful effect for the human health. Religious consideration, as I mentioned, we have 1.8 billion Muslim in the world, 1.1 billion Hindus, 0.5 Buddhists, and 10 million Jews. And Islam says that the cultured meat is halal only if the cells are used from halal slaughtered animal, means it's still alive and slaughtered, and no blood or animal-based serum is used in the production process. So the serum is the protein-rich in nutrients that is taken from the calf or from the pregnant cow. So it's taken from this baby calf. So you take it out and then you use it as the main ingredient to support the growth of the cultured meat in the lab. So only then you can, without this animal-based serum, yes, Islam will allow the use of this cultured meat. But the Jews agree that cultured meat itself is kosher. They say that this is green or this is safe. But for the kosher, maybe they consider only animals that have these two cloven or the split hooves, like the goat, like the cows. and they must chew the cud. So the cow must chew the cud, means this is the partially digested food. So the food that has been digested by the cow, for example, it will be spilled out at the mouth again for the second time and then digested again. So that's also definition based on the kosher rules. So all animals, for the kosher, for the Jews, they have to undergo this process. Another way, it means that for the Jews, they want the animals to eat the grass. And the seafood, if they want to eat it, they must have fins and scales. And eating shellfish is not allowed in Jews. So it's also forbidden to eat the birds of prey. Okay, so Hindu, they focus on non-violence, and means that vegetarian Hindus are likely to see cultured meat as a way of avoiding harming animals, and the Buddhists, they refrain from eating the meat. So there are lots of companies, a startup, start to rise up and bring forward this technology. So I list down here, this is quite new. This is the earliest, I think here, 2014 in Japan, but we have the 2013 one. But most of them are focusing on culturing these stem cells into the meat cell, into the muscle cells. And companies, they have different intentions. Some of them just focusing on pet food, some focusing on brisket for BBQ, some focus on the seafood, chicken, poultry, meatballs, and other fatty foods. So this is just an example. And we use the stem cell technology to do this. And currently, if you look at the internet, if you want to supply, or if you want to work with them, also they, are highly, they are highly required skills. It's a very high chance if you can, get the secure job with these, sets of companies, because they really want the knowledge of the stem cell as a part of their team. So when we talk about the stem cell technology, you cannot run away from these two main characteristics of stem cell. The first one, they can self-renew. It means that it can renew their own self. And the second one is they can differentiate into other specialized cells. So for each stem cell, they have these two attributes or characteristics. But some other adult cells, they are limited in terms of their capacity to self-renew. Okay, they can only differentiate. And it's also like the terminal differentiation, so they don't have any other chance to produce another cell types. One self-renew and differentiate. So this is the stem cell characteristic again. For example, if you got any injury, so you need a new stem cells to do the regenerative, to do the repair mechanism, so that you can replace the damaged cells. So where are the stem cells found? So we know that from the mammalian context, the sperm and also the egg are fertilized, and then they will produce these embryonic stem cells inside the during the gastrulation phase, which is at day 5. And scientists are taking or isolating the cells in black here in the inner side. So this is considered as the pluripotent stem cells or the embryonic stem cells. This is the inner cell mass, which is the inner size or the population of cells inside the blastocyst at day 5 of fertilization. So these cells, these special cells are known as pluripotent stem cells that can differentiate into any organs or tissues of the body. So scientists are using this idea in order to manipulate these pluripotent stem cells to make the new muscle cells. And this is also true for animal, both for animal and human. This is getting attention these days because due to the emergence of scientists starting to use induced pluripotent stem cells instead of the embryonic stem cell. So embryonic stem cell is prone to the ethical consideration because you are taking, really human beings and you're making a new human like that. Okay, just a simple explanation. But the induced pluripotent stem cell bypass the ethical consideration because they just take the adult cells from the human or animal and then they reprogram it back into the pluripotent state. Okay, in other words, it can be reversed into pluripotent state. By then you can start to differentiate into any tissues or organs of interest. So this is just an example. You have the adult cells in the urine, in the form of keratinocyte, blood cells or fibroblasts. You can induce them with the reprogramming factors. And after that, the cell will start to reprogram. The next day, you will find that they stuck down in the plastic and they are now start to be called as induced pluripotent stem cells. At this iPSC stage, it's important for you to know the protocol that you are following. If you want to go for the ectoderm or you making a new stem cells, so make sure you have all the growth factors and nutrients needed for that particular lineage. But if you're making muscle cells, like the mesoderm lineage, please go for that particular protocols. Nowadays, there are lots of thousands of protocols has been, keep on being optimized in order to give a good amount of cells. So there are lots of stem cell exploitation. I just put it here. I just put a red tick at the end of each point that is related with our discussion today. So what we can do according to the Islamic ethics, what are the limitations or precautions and the advantage and benefits of using stem cells. So now let's go to the lab side. I don't think this is going to take long, but just for just to share with you, there are methods to produce the meat simply by self-organizing and also scaffolding. So that's the main two ways that we can produce the meat. So the self-organizing, where the as planted animal muscle tissues are used to produce highly structured meat as self-organizing construct. However, you need to take, the cell source every time you want to make a new, the new meat. So it's time-consuming. It's also not so cost-effective, and scientists come out with a scaffolding technique using the tissue engineering, where they use a scaffold or using the beads, small beads, or we call it microcarrier beads, to guide the stem cells or the myoblast cells to form myofibers or meat. Okay, meat scaffold inside the tissue culture. So principally, we can see that the process involves the sampling or the biopsy stem cell collection from the animals, and after that, you dissociate with a certain enzymes. You need to dissociate unwanted cell types. So you want to select only the muscle cell types. So that's why we call it muscle cell isolation. It can be done by trypsinizing. It can be done by using enzymes like pronases or proteases. And then after that, you have this primary cell culture. You put it into incubator, culture for a few weeks. And after that, we can upscale the cell in a bioreactor. So from thousands or million cells, maybe 10K or maybe 10 million or 100 million cells, which is not enough. So if you're thinking that you need to upscale this, please go to the bioreactors. It can produce more and more cells. And after that, you can see the cells in the bioreactor, once they interact with each other, it start to differentiate and mature because of this expression of essential growth factors and signaling factors are happening. So after that, you can harvest and processing the muscle tissue. And well, then you can compare, and you can do some manipulation too. For example, if you want to add the fat cells like the adipocyte, if you want to add a few other structures, you are welcome to do that, as long as you maintain the texture and also the taste of the meat. So basically, this is the way that that they did in the lab. They isolate the muscle cells, they culture it in the lab, and after that they differentiate into the mature muscle cells. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, this is a combined culture method. We're not focusing only making the muscle cells, we also integrating the endothelial cells in the middle in green here in EC, endothelial cells that functions to supply the oxygen or the nutrients to the tissues. And also you want the FAP, which is the fibroadipogenic progenitor cells. So basically, this is the three main composition of the cultured meat. And there are lots of studies on cultured meat scaffold. They are optimizing what is the best way to recapitulate the real meat in the market, or whether these alternative protein can compete with the ready real meat that we have from the slaughtered cows of slaughter animals. So if you look here, they're utilizing the gelatin fiber scaffold. They seed it with the cells. You can see that the cells are able to grow very nicely and form a 3D architecture. And also some of these scaffold are made from an edible sources, from the soy, from the plant, from the tofu. As in example here, you can see in the B, so that's the decellularized apple tissue scaffold. So instead of using a biomaterial, which is prone to the toxicity or are not biodegradable, why don't you just use a plant substitute that is edible and at the same time can maintain the structure of the meat? In terms of the commercialization, you can see people are the top or the most popular protein source. The second one is poultry, from the chicken and duck, 19% in pork and cultured seafood. But among these, I think 32, based on this publication, 32 cultivated meat companies, only 2 companies focuses on the mouse meat. So they also make the meat from the mouse in order to support the life of these pets, whether it's lab animals or the pets. One company produces kangaroo and the horse meat. So it's really interesting there. And you can see that the government started to stepping in and try to involve with all these companies and start to fund them for the research purposes. So this is basically the summary of the most popular animals and what we do with that. Okay, for example, the beef we use to make them as a meatball, patty, steak. For the seafood, we use to make them as a fish fillet, shrimp, or fish maw. So this is just a name of the cultured meat. None of these are, in Malaysia. We not have any of these in Malaysia yet. We have one, the nearest one, which is I think short meat. I think in Singapore that work closely with the US. If you look at the geographical distribution, most of the company, I can say it comes from the USA on the left-hand side. And of course, the Israel, because they are the one who started this pattern or start with this technology. And some other countries like Japan, Netherlands start to adapt this stem cell technology to make the cultured meat. So what are the main challenge? Main challenge is to sustain or to grow these cultured meat in the lab. That's the only thing. How we want to make a replacement or cheaper culture media, because inside the culture media we have the FBS. As I mentioned earlier, FBS is the fetal bovine serum, which is protein rich, drawn from the fetus of pregnant cow during slaughter. Some pet lovers, some animal lovers, they don't love this. They hate this so much. That's why some of the companies that produce the media shifted from serum-based into serum-free media. Some say that xeno-free media. Okay, so this is the animal-free alternative. Good effort from Blue Nalu and Mosa Meat, another company. Okay, so they eliminate the use of FBS. This is very good way of not using the FBS, which is harmful to the animals. Okay, so they use the serum-free approach using the microbial fermentation to produce the recombinant protein or any protein of interest. Just use the bacteria and grow and produce, or you can extract any protein of interest. Insect-based product as a protein source, also another alternative. And you can also derive this amino acid from plants and from non-animal hydrolysates. Okay, so the main challenge is to grow this cultivated meat in a large scale. So the scale up is, always a never-ending, questions and issues that we need to cater. So just to put the comparison between the tissue engineering and the cultured meat, you can see that most of these, common requirements are needed by both parties, which is biocompatible. The scaffold should be biodegradable. The suitable mechanical strength should be porous, and so on. All right, so this is only the scale up, and we need to shift from the bioreactors to scaffolding, because some of the bioreactors, you found that the cells start to combine with each other, and they lacking, or they are not receiving the intended nutrients, so they will die in the culture. Instead, we can shift to scaffolding, which is a better option. Technological changes, of course, we are lacking of expertise. We don't want this because this is expensive. We are lacking the infrastructure and facilities to support this new technology. Mass production bioreactors, we don't even have these bioreactors. We have like a small vacuum tube only. All right, but if you look at the good side, the benefit in the future, it does not take years to grow. For the cow, maybe you have to grow for 5 maybe to 10 years before they are ready to slaughter. But for cell-cultured meat, it doesn't take years to grow. It less impact on climate change with a less greenhouse gas emission. It can be produced anywhere, and it's also ethical. In the US, the only regulatory bodies that I can find is that the FDA and USDA jointly, they are jointly cooperate in order to regulate this cultivated meat production. So they don't have any existing regulatory framework in order to address this issue. And of course, they become stricter as years to come. And the consumer perceive this, we have the vegetarians, we have the people from different religions, sects. Okay, they have lots of perception, and they have lots of ideas about bringing this cultivated meat forward. So they complain that this is lack of taste and textures compared to the real meat, because nowadays the real meat, is the best one. Okay, the best meat that we can consume. And in the future, I think this is going to be the last slide for my part. Cultured meat is a sustainable and environmentally friendly alternative. Technological innovation can accelerate commercialization, especially in the meat products. The texture can be improved, and I think the optimization is keep on ongoing till now. Some of them are using the rabbit and the cow vascular cells in order to improve the texture. When you eat the meat, you have this, what we call you can chew it, and also you can break it easily. They're not too flexy. Okay, just like the real meat. Okay, so they just want to recapitulate the real meat. The use of sensor technology in order to tell the machine or the bioreactors, okay, stop, now the media is already obsolete, so you need to replace with a new nutrients, so it's better option. In the future, expertise, we need more process bioengineer, we need more tissue engineer, stem cell scientists, we need regulators, we need policymakers in order to make this happen. And finally, the main aim for my talk is, you need to produce the higher protein, okay, higher output with lower input. Okay, you don't want to use the fertilizers, or you want to reduce the amount or the volume of culture medium in the way of making this cultured meat. And I think hopefully this gonna kickstart the discussion and also throw you some ideas in the future what we can do in order to address the challenge in the future. And of course, this is for the sustainable development goals. And I hope that summarized the slide. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tengku Faris, for the great presentation on lab-grown alternative protein. I hope everyone have obtained valuable information and better insight on food security and nature ecosystem in accordance to sustainable well-being. So now we move on to the Q&A session. If there is any question from the audience, you can unmute yourself or write down the question on the chat box. So, wait. Okay, while we wait for if there is any question from the audience, for me, I have one question to Dr. Redzuan. So we know that the climate change can cause accumulation of toxin in the plant. So currently, is there any like solution or short-term solution to reduce the toxin in the plant that we consume? For example, if do we need to avoid any food or do we need to avoid any part of the plant?
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Syed, for the question. So yeah, there is a mitigation effort in order to avoid this kind of climate change-induced plant-borne toxicity. For example, in the case of cassava, okay, the ubi kayu that I mentioned in the presentation. Okay, so even though that we know that the climate change can increase the tuber toxicity of the cassava, and the population or the people of, especially in the Africa, they have to ensure that before they cook the tuber and also the leaf of the cassava, they have to they have to double up the pre-wash process, okay, before using the cassava for the cooking. And also from the point of view of the genetics, okay, and for example, especially for the plant geneticists, okay, they have to go into these issues, okay, especially by looking at the for example, in the case of cassava and also the poison ivy, okay, how to minimize and how to reduce, okay, the level of toxicity or the level of secondary metabolites in the plants, okay, using certain kinds of genetic techniques, or for example, the one that Dr. Faris is very expert, which is the CRISPR technique. So these are among of the ways, okay, to minimize, okay, the level of toxic metabolites in the plant under the exposure of certain abiotic stress.
Okay, thank you, Doctor, for the answer. Is there any other question from the audience? If there is no question, then I would like to remind everyone again to register your attendance in the I attend link, and also there's a link for the evaluation form posted on the chat box. So all participants need to fill up the evaluation form, because the e-certificate will only be given to those who fill in the form. So I assume there is no other question from the audience. So thank you again, Dr. Muhammad, Dr. Redzuan, and Dr. Tengku Faris for having the presentation with us. It was a pleasure to have you with us. So this concludes the webinar. Thank you all for attending, and we hope you have learned and enjoyed the webinar. Till we meet again in the upcoming webinar organized by Planetiium. Stay safe and healthy. Let's end our session with Tasbih Kafarah and Surah Al-As. Subhanallah. Thank you again, and Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.